Let's move on now to Scuderia Toro Rosso, who had a great year. They were just, I say great, they were just wonderful to have around in the pit lane at a time in a year when there was a lot of misery and just general depression in the Formula One pit lane. It was always fun to go down to Toro Rosso and see a few smiles and have a laugh, because it is still basically Minardi with a little bit of Red Bull money there. They went into a new factory actually on that note this year, and it was a big deal for them to move from where they'd been in Faenza for so long, still very nearby, but into a much more coherent and cohesive factory with everything under one roof. And that takes its toll, of course, in terms of the energy that needs to be expended to make that happen. But overall, I think they did a very good job. How did you see that car from a technical perspective?
I mean, you could argue that was probably one of the best chassis of the year. With the same engine for the first half of the year, it outperformed Red Bull. Throughout the year, it was there or thereabouts, depending on the circuit and what everyone else was doing. It was very much, if you consider the Renault power unit as being, you know, such a poorly performing unit in comparison to all of the other cars that are around Toro Rosso, it shows you just how good that chassis is. And you know, all credit goes to James Key and the technical guys at Faenza, but equally their aero team, which has grown massively over the past few years, which is actually based in the UK in Brackley with their own wind tunnel there. They've actually grown from something like 30 aero people to over 100 now, and they've taken lots of people that had fallen out from the Caterham and the Manor teams over the winter as well. So you can really see how that entire operation is just working really efficiently to produce the best possible chassis. And I think, you know, they won some awards last week for the Race Tech magazine Best Aero Department of the Year against people like Porsche and Mercedes and Red Bull. So I think that shows there is credit to be given to Toro Rosso on the chassis side of things.
Ben Waterhouse, another good man there, ex-Sauber performance engineer, did a very good job throughout the year working with James Key, who's like Andy Green, just developing as another two great British engineers who, I say great, and I actually use that word correctly I think this time. They potentially are able to achieve a lot in the future, both of those two guys. I wouldn't like to separate them in terms of what they can do and how their brains work, but you know, we talk about Formula One's in good hands when you look at the young drivers coming up. Certainly in terms of engineering skills, the British legacy of Formula One continues with James Allison at Ferrari as well, of course. Drivers, what a combination of drivers. That's what made Toro Rosso's year, really, because at the one end of the spectrum we had Carlos Sainz, who's, well, he's a Ronnie Peterson, isn't he, really, a Gilles Villeneuve to some extent. He's just reflexes and car control. He's Romain Grosjean, I guess, in modern parlance. Very, very reactive driver, loves the wet, loves any spooky situation, loves to get on top of the rear, drives on the absolute edge with zero margin for error when he's really going for it, which is why he made a lot of mistakes ultimately, and they came back to bite him a few times, as per Russia. And on the other end of the spectrum, we had Max Verstappen, who to my eye is a born natural Lewis Hamilton in the way he just has that car sitting on the road squarely all the time, deceptively fast. He's really, really on it all the time, even when he looks slow. And beyond that, because he's manipulating the car so well and he's so on top of what he's doing, he's giving himself, I don't know, 20% additional brain capacity, or brain capacity he's not using to drive that thing on the limit, reflex-wise, to think about all the other aspects of his life. And that a rookie in Formula One, things to learn, tracks to learn, systems to learn, people to get to know, way to behave on the track. And right from the start, when he was learning circuits, it was so impressive how slow he was when, in the first couple of laps, when he was keeping out of everybody's way. He wasn't trying to prove a point, he was just droning around Carlos Reutemann style when he was looking for a quick lap back in the 80s. And I thought he was exemplary in everything he did, particularly in that Monaco shunt, when there's no doubt Romain Grosjean braked earlier than he needed to going into Saint-Devote, and obviously he was right behind, and obviously he caught his right rear, but he didn't make any fuss about it. Within 2 days, all he wanted to do was Genk karting and go up and go karting again and go racing. And what a superb attitude he has. It doesn't really, I think it's irrelevant whether he's 18, 22 or 32. I think he would be the same regardless of his age. Of course, it's amazing that he's so young. But, wow. A difficult call actually for Red Bull. I suppose, you know, Daniel Kvyat did a good enough job to retain his drive, but they must be thinking the future is Max Verstappen. We've got to make sure this guy doesn't go to Ferrari or Mercedes or anywhere else. So a fabulous year all round for Toro Rosso. It's a bit surprising, actually, they didn't finish a little bit higher. They were beaten by...
their problem really was reliability that killed their point scores. The Renault power unit, you know, with its repeated failures in the races. I think Carlos Sainz obviously got the brunt of that for some reason. Really blunted what could have been a much more higher performing season in terms of final results. But you know, results are on paper. What we actually saw during the races, where you saw it was always the Toro Rosso's overtaking on the most boring of afternoons, just goes to show that the impact that those drivers and that chassis had amongst the rest of the grid.
Yeah, and it wasn't always Renault. I remember Max Verstappen missed out on Q2 and Q3 in Suzuka due to
the bodywork.
Yeah, it was a failure. It was a Toro Rosso failure, so we shouldn't blame Renault
not
comprehensively on that. You know, also a part of it is Toro Rosso are also the Renault, the Red Bull B team, and therefore they are prone to midfield team mishaps that come from those situations. But overall, a really nice team to have around in Formula One, and I think there were a few people out there who were saying, well, you know, Red Bull shouldn't be complaining about this, complaining about that, and if Mateschitz doesn't like it, you know, he needs to like... I mean, we should all be thinking we're unbelievably lucky to have this guy spending so much money, let alone on Red Bull, but also on Toro Rosso, to have them there in Formula One, and long may it continue.
Absolutely.